Now, I'll start this out with the usual warning that there will be spoilers for the latest episode of Clone Wars, which in this case is called Old Friends Not Forgotten. So if you have not seen it yet, and you don't want anything ruined, and you really don't, it's a good time to click away. That said, this is what I think we've all been waiting for. Begun the Siege of Mandalore story arc has, and wow, worth the wait it truly has been. And when it opened with the old school Lucasfilm logo and decided to forego the usual Clone Wars theme in favor of the classic Star Wars music we all know and love, along with the red Clone Wars logo, I knew we were in for the start of something special, and I was not disappointed. And though I may have had some issues with the first two story arcs they gave us here in Season 7, mainly the last one, or the Ahsoka Walkabout story arc, which does have a degree of relevancy in this episode that I'll get into later, all that is forgiven or forgotten because it clearly looks like the majority of their time, effort, and attention was pumped into this arc, and the end result so far is a truly cinematic experience. Never before has the show looked this good or felt this epic. I like to tell people that if you're somehow having trouble appreciating the look of this final season, go back and watch, even for just a minute or two, the Clone Wars movie from 2008 and see how far they've come from the blocky characters with minimal facial expressions and the stiff animation they had back then, to say nothing of some of the other major improvements they've made over time. Anyway, getting back to it, I love that we open by seeing and learning that the Jedi Generals have been sent to the Outer Rim, that we see Plo Koon on Cato Nemoidia and Aayla Secura on Felucia. It's almost chilling to see the pieces move into their final positions before Order 66 is executed. We also get a glimpse of young Kanan, or as he's known at the time, Caleb Dume. In fact, there are a lot of what you might call Rebels characters in here, including Ursa Wren, mother of Sabine, and Gar Saxon, who was also a very prominent figure in that show, though he technically first appears, or would have first appeared, in the Son of Dathomir Clone Wars story arc that was turned into a 4-part comic book from Dark Horse, the only comics from Dark Horse that are still considered canon today. And going back to the start of this episode, I thought it was great to get some classic Obi-Wan and Anakin Clone Wars style interaction and banter. We got a little bit in the Bad Batch arc, but this was nice to see, and it's almost a shame that going into Revenge of the Sith now, where we know that friendship will end, that we didn't get a bit more time with these two characters together here in the final season, that we didn't get maybe one more arc where they really are featured. Instead, the focus has primarily been on Ahsoka, which I'm not saying I'm upset about. Again, I love the character, and I've argued before she is probably the main character of this anthology-style series, or the closest thing it really has to one. And the previous arc, the Ahsoka Walkabout arc again, was to further set up a bit of animosity she has towards the Jedi and their handling of the war and where their priorities are, that they're really not about the people anymore. This gets highlighted in the little argument about dropping everything to go and defend Coruscant and the Chancellor. Though I will say Ahsoka's argument is a bit weak here, to put it mildly, though I still do see the point she is trying to make about the Jedi, which in the grand scheme of things is a good one, that they serve the Republic and not the Force anymore, arguably the reason why the Jedi of this time period will fail and fall. Anyway, though I do very much get the point she's trying to make, and she's not necessarily wrong, and the show is trying to emphasize how much she's changed since the last time Obi-Wan and Anakin saw her, the capital of the Republic is under attack in the middle of a war. Of course, as important as the Jedi have become to the war, anything and everything will be done to protect it over assisting the Mandalorians in what is essentially a civil war among their own, especially considering Mandalore is a neutral system. Furthermore, to briefly go back to Ahsoka's stance change against the Jedi, I think the arc from Season 5, where Ahsoka is of course accused of a bombing in a hangar bay of the Jedi Temple, and goes on the run before it's later revealed, thanks to Anakin, that Barriss actually did it, but Ahsoka still chooses to leave anyway. Well, I think that arc alone would have been enough to get the point across about why Ahsoka would be upset with the Jedi right now, why she would feel like a different character at this point in the story. I really don't know that we needed a whole arc to hammer home that point or to explain why she sees things more from the perspective of the people now, and the only way I could really see that arc being truly relevant in some way, or needed you could say, is if at the end of all of this, the end of this arc, it's the Martez sisters who somehow help her escape after everything with Order 66 goes down. But I digress, because I did enjoy the reunion between Ahsoka and Anakin. I loved the almost awkwardness or tension there was to it, Anakin kind of reminded me of a guy who runs into a girlfriend he broke up with a while back, one he's not quite over, and he doesn't know what to say or how to act exactly. He's happy to see them, yet at the same time doesn't want to admit or betray how much he's actually missed them. You can also tell Ahsoka still really cares for Anakin, that there's this part of her that would love to go back to the way things were, but too much of her is beyond that now. And to be clear, I'm not implying there was anything romantic like that between the two, only that that's the vibe I got, which I think was the perfect way to play it, considering we all know Anakin's weakness as a Jedi is his inability to let go. Also, this contrasted perfectly with Obi-Wan's interaction with Bo-Katan, where she's all but accusing him of not caring about the memory of Satine. I mean, here's Obi-Wan, and he's offered the chance to go after Maul, to track down and, again, kill the one who murdered the love of his life. But he says and means that he will not allow his feelings to cloud his judgment, and this is what makes Obi-Wan the great Jedi that he is, and further shows something that I think a lot of people misunderstand about the Jedi. It's not that they deny their feelings or try to pretend they don't have them, it's all about controlling them. Obi-Wan loves Satine. He's admitted it before and he admits it again here, but he's able to put responsibility as a Jedi before any and all of that, which of course Anakin cannot, which is why I thought this was a terrific scene. Another terrific part of this episode was seeing how the clones treated Ahsoka, that they insisted on still calling her Commander, which is a fantastic callback to the Clone Wars movie, where Rex was reluctant to concede that she outranked him, saying then that experience outranks everything. And not only does this show the respect they now have for Ahsoka, that she's earned her place, Jedi or not, but also shows how much it means to the clones to serve under the Jedi, what their generals mean to them. And so hearing Anakin say how loyalty means everything to the clones is almost haunting, considering we know they're days away from committing the ultimate act of betrayal with Order 66, albeit unwillingly. And I love that in the opening battle of this episode, Obi-Wan saves Cody from being blown up by a missile, when in a few days Cody will be giving the order to open fire on Obi-Wan. You really have to wonder what the clones thought when they later came to their senses, how devastated they were to learn or realize what they'd done. Another little thing I liked here in this episode was learning Shaak-Ti was sent to protect the Chancellor once the attack on Coruscant had begun, which aligns with what takes place in the original Clone Wars series from back in 2003, and though I'm getting the sense that unfortunately we're not going to see any of the Battle of Coruscant, in my headcanon I can just assume that the events of that old series are more or less still what happens, at least on Coruscant. Obviously the Anakin and Obi-Wan parts are greatly contradicted. We also see in this episode Rex get promoted to Commander as the 501st is split in two, with half being sent to Mandalore with Ahsoka, and this of course explains where Rex is during the attack on the Jedi Temple, as seen in Revenge of the Sith. Oh, and speaking of the 501st, when towards the beginning of the episode when they all use jetpacks, I couldn't have been the only one who was thinking, they fly now? Anyway, setting that aside, the battle on Mandalore was a true spectacle, and it was so great to see Ahsoka back in action using her old lightsabers that Anakin had upgraded and made blue. Ultimately, of course, in pursuit of Maul, Ahsoka leads a squad down into the sewers or something of that sort, which is actually a trap. All the troopers get picked off one by one, and as Captain Vaughn dies, he apologizes to Ahsoka and once again calls her Commander, turning what was, and still is meant to be, a show or sign of respect into a sting as Ahsoka, their leader, places the blame on herself for their deaths. Yet another reason why this was such a brilliant episode. But of course, this trap wasn't for her, it was for Obi-Wan. We know that thanks to Maul's words as he shows up and says, "I was hoping for Kenobi, why are you here?" After which the episode ends and leaves us all hanging and looking forward to next week. Okay, so in closing, this was a fantastic, beautifully made episode. Again, I think this is what we've all been waiting for. This is Clone Wars, or dare I say Star Wars, at its absolute best. I don't want to pass any sort of final judgment or get too excited, but I already have little doubt this will end up being one of the best, if not the best, arcs in all of Clone Wars. And all is gladly forgiven if, again, what all their time and effort was put into making Season 7 was getting this arc just right. I mean, as I said in previous reviews here in the 7th season, it's not that the other arcs were bad necessarily. If we're being fair, they were good to average when compared to all previous seasons, but I think people were expecting something grand, something big out of this final season, and now we are certainly getting it. And the great part is, this was just the beginning. This was just the first of the final 4 episodes, and I cannot wait to see what the next 3 have in store. I cannot wait to see how this all ends. Well, that's all I've got for you this time. Now it's your turn to tell me what you thought of this first part of the Siege of Mandalore. Everything you hoped for and more, or does it maybe not live up to your expectations so far? Whatever the case may be, leave a comment below and let's talk some Star Wars. And until next time, thanks for watching.